Today I'm just going to virtualize a physical machine, convert a physical machine into a virtual machine from a ghost image. Just going to log into my VMware server. Here you can see I've already have two machines converted. This is an XP box. This is my small business server. They are both up and running. To create a virtual machine from a physical machine using a ghost image, first thing you have to do is you have to create a machine. So what we're going to do is we're basically just going to create a virtual machine with a blank hard disk, no operating system, and then we're going to restore that ghost image to that machine just like as if it were a physical machine, which is pretty amazing. So just going to right click within the area here and select new machine. I'm going to go with a typical. I'm going to call this one terminal server. It's also my SQL server. I have SQL Server installed on it as well, on the machine that I'm going to restore an image from. So right now it's telling you this is the data store that it's going to be put on. The guest operating system is Windows, and in this case it's going to be Windows 2008 32-bit. We're going to use the virtual network card. This disk is a little small, 40 gigs. I'm going to go with 60 gigs. I'm not exactly sure what the original disk size was when I took the ghost image. I'm going to leave everything else default. I'm going to check the edit virtual machine settings so that I can look at the configuration after it's created. So I've created a virtual machine here. It's giving me a list of hardware. I'm going to keep everything the same here. I have one CPU, that's what I want. Memory size 2 gig, I'm pretty sure that's okay for my terminal server. Now under options, you have boot options. So remember, we're restoring a ghost image just like as if this were a physical box. So kind of think along the lines of how you'd restore a ghost image in a physical machine. On a physical machine, you might, there's many ways to do it, but you can boot off of a disk, a floppy disk, or a CD. And in this case, we're going to boot off the CD, a special CD that I have made. So I'm going into the Options tab of this machine. I'm going to the boot options, and I'm going to click right here. Next time the virtual machine boots, force entry into BIOS setup screen. So when I power on that machine, it's going to go into the virtual machine's BIOS screen, and then it's going to let me tell that machine to boot off the CD drive. Another thing you need to make sure of is we have to add a USB controller here. And then not only do we have to add a USB controller, we have to add the USB device that contains the ghost image. So just going to click here. So you don't have the option to add a USB device yet because you don't have a controller to see it. So first I'm going to add the USB controller. I'm just going to go with the defaults here. So now I have a USB controller. So now when I go to click and add a USB device, I have a USB device. Before this was shaded right here. So once I click next, it's going to detect the disk that has my image on it, which is a Seagate free agent drive. So it already sees the disk. I have rebooted my host with the USB drive plugged in. I'm not sure if you need to reboot your host once you plug in your USB drive, but this is a 500 gigabyte USB drive. Kind of a slow drive, but it's fine. Now if you miss these things, remember you can always just pause tape, rewind, finish. Okay, now I have a USB controller and a USB device that sees my drive. I've gone into the boot options and I've told the virtual machine to give me the BIOS screen next time you boot up so that I can go in there and tell that machine to boot off of the CD drive. So I'm going to click finish. It's going to create my machine, and it is powered off right now. All I'm going to do is right click. I'm going to go to open the console. You don't want to power it on yet. because you won't be able to see what's happening. You go to the console first. You can power it on in the future when you don't need to see the console, but go to the console. The machine is powered off. That's why the stop button is indented here. So all I'm going to do, first let me make sure my CD is in my CD drive of my host server. Okay, so I've confirmed my CD is in the drive, and I'm just going to go ahead and go to the console of my new virtual machine here and click the power on button. I know it looks like a play button, but if you have the mouse over it, it says power on. So it's going to take a few seconds for it to get started here. I'm moving it over to the left because the screen is going to get bigger. Oh, it didn't get bigger. So right now I'm in my BIOS screen, but my controls are not there. If I move my arrows, it doesn't nothing happens, so I'd have to double click inside the window here, and now I have control over my BIOS screen. So right now it's set to boot first, try to boot first from the removable drive, then the hard drive, then the CD-ROM drive. So I'm going to move down to the CD-ROM drive, just click the plus sign on my keyboard and move the CD-ROM drive up to the top. I'm going to move the USB drive down to below the hard drive just for now. And if you look down here at the bottom right, you can see that it says F10 to save and exit. So I'm going to hit F10. Oh, my F key isn't working. Let me hit my function key first. F10, save and exit. And save configurations and exit now. Once I hit yes, once I hit enter, it's going to continue with the boot, and it's going to look for the CD drive, and then it should boot off my CD drive. Oh, nope, went to the NIC. Why is it going to the NIC? I'm going to right click on this virtual machine here, select power, power off. And there's no operating system to worry about. The error message said, make sure you shut down the operating system. So I have to go back and edit settings and look at what my problem is. Boot options. Maybe I selected the wrong virtual CD drive. Let's go to edit settings and look at my CD drives here. Ah, yes. It's all coming back to me. Okay, so under hardware, I have to go to CD, and even though it appears that this should be the CD drive of the host machine, you have to select the host and select the device and use the default device there. And then I think connect at power on. Yes, so this is the setting I forgot to change. So I right clicked, went to edit settings, went to the hardware tab, went to the CD drive. I changed the option under device type to host device, and this is the virtual device for the CD drive that's connected to my physical host machine. Now I'm going to click OK, and let's try this again. Oh, I'm not going to power on. I'm going to the console. I'm going to click the play button, which if I hover for a second, you'll see it says power on. Why doesn't it say it? Okay. So that's the power on button. Now I hear my CD drive going on the host machine, so definitely got it going here. It's not going to go look at the NIC to try to boot off the NIC. This is Windows pre-installation environment. This is basically the same thing that is used when you install Windows. Windows actually creates a pre-installation environment so that it can talk to the hard disk without occupying the hard disk, and detects the hardware and installs the operating system for you. In this case, I'm loading Windows pre-installation environment, and then I'm going to run Ghost 32. This is a custom-built disk, but in a normal case, if you have like Ghost 2003, you would just boot off your Ghost 2003 disk and perform the same steps. It's the environment, or the screens are almost identical. Windows PE is finally booted, and now I'm just going to load Ghost 32. So this is a familiar screen for those of you who have used Ghost. So you can see Ghost, Semantic Ghost 11.0.1. So I'm going to do a local disk from an image. So hopefully you're familiar with Ghost. It gets pretty tricky, pretty complicated. It's not really that complicated, you just got to know your way around. So this is where you can make a big error. You can image the wrong drive and then you're really messed up. So this is asking me image file to restore from. So now I have to find the drive that contains my image that I want to restore from. I named my drive data, so that's how I can easily identify it. So the name of the disk is data. I always name my ghost image folders GHSTIMGS, ghost images, 8 characters, like that's how old I am, because I make my folders 8 characters long just to overcome any file length name limitations. So I have a subfolder here called serve1. So serve1 is my terminal server. So in that subfolder, boy, moving too fast. Click once. When you're in this window, you click once. In that subfolder, I have 3 images named ABC, C being the latest one. You can see how old it is. Back from 2010, I created that image. I have the physical box, but no sense in grabbing it and doing a new image. So this is really just a demonstration. So now it's saying select local destination drive by clicking on the drive number. So it doesn't look like it's selected except that there's a box around it. If I click here, it'll select that one. But that's actually the source drive. See, 478,000 megabytes. That's my 500 gig Seagate drive. If I tried to restore it there, it'd say you can't restore it to itself. But in many cases, there's other partitions and other drives, and it'll become confusing. So you really have to make sure you are familiar with what drive is getting what. And I know that the drive I'm restoring to is 60 gigabytes, so I can see that here. So it's drive 1. So now the little box is around that, and it's selected. So we'll go ahead and click OK. It's asking me to define the new size, so I could actually define the new size. And here, actually, you can see that the old size was 29 gigs. My guess was wrong. I made it 60 gigs, but fortunately I have a 750 gigabyte host drive, so I don't have to worry about the size here. Data size is only 13 gigs, so the OS is actually 13 gigs. The actual drive size is 29 gigs. So this is the data size. So this is the amount of space being used. This is the drive. The original drive was this big, 30 gigs. And I can actually just type in a new size here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to make it 30 gig because I want things to be simple. So let's see if it'll let me do it. 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure how that's going to affect the virtual machine because I defined a drive size in the virtual machine. I think it's going to resize it to 30 gigs. So I clicked OK. Now it's saying proceed with disk restore. Destination drive will be permanently overwritten. That's we don't care because it's a virtual machine. Now this process can take quite a long time with a USB drive. It took me about 4 hours to restore my small business server, but this one appears to be going pretty quick. So it's also a much smaller data size. So here you can see time elapsed, time remaining. It's saying it's going to take, wow, only 13 minutes, but that's going to just continually increase, and it'll probably go up to like an hour. So you can see it's going up 423, 14 minutes and 40 seconds. Now it's up to 15 minutes, so that's going to increase as time goes on, and it continues to recalculate the speed that it's restoring the image from. So once it's done, I'll come back. Okay, so it looks like our image is done. It only took 16 minutes actually, so we got pretty lucky. I'm not going to reset the computer because I don't want the computer to boot yet, because before we can boot this machine that we just restored the image to, we have to prepare the operating system to be a virtual machine. So I'm just going to click continue, then I'm going to quit out of Ghost, and then in this, from here you exit, and normally the Windows PE would exit, but in a virtual machine it doesn't seem to exit. So I have to, even if I click power off, it's going to say you can't do that, and because I'm missing something, like that happens. So I just close the actual virtual machine. Going back to my host server here, it's powered on. I'm going to right click and I'm going to power it off. It's saying, you know, sure that you're powering off properly. So now the machine is powered off. Before I go on, I want to go over the documentation part of this. So, you know, when I first started to try to get my machines created from image files, I found this document called Converting Image Files into Virtual Machine Disks. And this document describes doing it with Ghost 2003, the other great imaging solution that has been around for years. And it gives you step by step and even gives you some detailed steps on using Ghost. But in the document, it goes to, okay, reconfiguring the operating system. So it says, reconfigure the operating system virtual disk. You must perform P2V assistant system reconfiguration on any disk that contains an operating system in order to use that virtual disk as a boot drive in a virtual machine. So here's the documentation for vCenter Converter Standalone. So if you go into this document here, vCenter Converter Standalone 5.5 release notes, you'll get pretty much the directions you need to convert a virtual machine's disk. So now this machine has the image restored to it, but if I were to try to start this machine, I would go to a blue screen because it's looking for my hardware and it's not there. It's the image, the operating system on the virtual disk has not been converted yet to work as a virtual machine. In order to make it to work as a virtual machine, I have to run the standalone converter, which I have conveniently stored on my desktop here. VMware vCenter Converter Standalone Client. So I'm just going to open VMware Standalone Client. I don't want to sidetrack too much, but this utility has the ability to reside on this computer and convert another physical computer on your network to a virtual machine, provided you have access. There are roadblocks, like I tried to convert a machine that wasn't on my domain, so I hit the firewall and it didn't want to let the client install the agent, etc. But you can also install this utility, which is only 169 megabytes, on a physical machine and convert the machine from there, and that'll add it to your host server. In this case, I'm not going to convert a machine, I'm going to configure a machine. So I'm going to click on Configure Machine. It's asking me the IP address of my host server. I'm going to log in. And it's going to give me a list of machines and ask me which one do I want to configure. So I'm just going to highlight the machine that I just built. I'm going to click Next. And it's going to prepare the disk of that virtual machine so that it'll allow me to boot the machine in a virtual environment. So I'm going with the defaults and just going to hit Next. Going to hit Next. Right now the process is running. This usually goes pretty quick. Okay, you can see it's now completed. Start time was 12:28. Finish time was 30 seconds. Wow, that was pretty quick. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to exit this application. I'm going to go back to my virtual host. And now I'm going to attempt to power on my new server, my newly virtualized server, by going to the console, not to the power button. So Here we go with my console. The stop button is indented because the machine is powered off. I'm going to hit the start power on button. Let's see if we get a blue screen or a real boot up screen here. Oh, no, I don't want to boot from the CD. Good. So that's a good sign. It's saying, you know, the system didn't shut down properly. Do you want to start normally? It prompted me to boot from the CD because it knows the CD drive is there and it has an operating system on it. Let's just go ahead and hit OK to start Windows normally. I expect it will start normally. And here we go. That doesn't look like my Windows PE boot disk. I don't see my boot disk drive running on my host server, so that is the operating system. Good sign. Server 2008 standard. Quite an amazing thing to do, to be able to restore a ghost image to a virtual machine. Okay, so I made it to the login screen. That's a really good sign. Now, when you do Control-Alt-Delete on a virtual machine, you do Control-Alt-Insert. Otherwise, it tries to send Control-Alt-Delete to your local machine. I'm just going to log in here. And we are logging in. So the old password was cached correctly, even though the domain controller is not powered on. So here we have it. I'm logged in. So as you can see here right now, the machine is auto-detecting, installing device driver software, saying I found a new device, it's going to try to install everything. I just cancel these in the beginning. Okay, so I like to, you know, if I run into problems when I'm making a training video, I like to go over the problem and the outcome, because chances are when you go to do whatever you're trying to do, you're going to run into problems. So right here I have a list of many devices that were detected, some of which will be removed from the machine, but one of them is the Intel Pro 100 network card. So now it says ready to use. So even though I haven't even restarted, some of these device detections are going to require restart. So even though I haven't restarted, and I'm going to click restart later, now if I go into ipconfig, I should see that NIC and I should have an IP address. DHCP is enabled, so after the restoration, even though this physical machine had a static IP, the NIC's set to DHCP, which I'm going to set it to static and then give it an IP address of 3 for my subnet. You know, 192.168.18.3, because that's what I recall this machine was when I had it running. But in order to do that, we need to go to the NIC. But first I'm going to go ahead and perform the reboot as requested by Windows. And I'll do that just like I would on any normal machine. Restart. So in reality, this server is a part of a domain, and it should talk to the domain controller first, and then go out to the outside DNS servers if the domain controller is not running. The domain controller is not turned on at the moment, which is the small business server. So, but I've set it to the static IP of the domain controller, which has DNS on it. So now we should be able to surf at least. And we can surf. So a couple of things I wanted to go over in closing. When I imaged the machine in Ghost, I tried to set the drive size to 30 gigabytes, and I questioned whether or not that was going to work. And in fact, it didn't work. The virtual machine still believes it has a 60 gigabyte drive. I tried to resize the drive going into settings, but it didn't allow me to reset the drive size. So I have to learn a little more and figure out how that's done. I'm still learning here. I'm not an expert. I did say also that I was going to remove some devices because there were certain devices that were being set up on the machine that were not necessary, like the floppy drive. So don't need this floppy drive. Just going to click remove. Now the floppy drive is removed. The other devices, pretty sure I can't remove anything else. So in closing, we successfully created a virtual server from the image of a physical server taken using Ghost Corporate Edition. That's my video. Thanks a lot for watching.